Welcome to Caffeinated Flicks.
where we drink coffee and celebrate diverse directors.
I'm Celeste.
And I'm Kenzie. Button.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okie dokie artichoke. How has your day been?
Slow. I woke up because yesterday we were so busy. We were on our feet
Yeah.
all day doing stuff. My feet still hurt this morning, but I didn't get out of bed till like late, and then I just went from my bed to my couch and spent most of the morning there, as you saw when you showed up at my door.
I always assume that if you don't answer your phone, like if you don't answer my text message, you're at home.
Yeah.
So I figured it was a safe bet because you usually lose your phone someplace in your house, and that's when you don't answer me.
Yeah.
So
I know, because I like responded to you like 40 minutes after you messaged me, and I'm like, dang, she's fast.
it was perfect because I was right there.
It worked out perfectly.
So it was yesterday when you had your family over?
Yes, and it was such a good time.
Aw.
I know we decorated like the house all like summery themed, and we like have, like I told you before, we had like some new like patio furniture stuff, and everything was super cute, and I loved it. And
Oh, I can't wait to see the new patio furniture
Yeah.
when we come over next week.
And hopefully it's hotter because the pool is still cold.
How is that even possible?
I don't know how that's possible. But even like it's in the 90s, it doesn't feel like it's in the 90s outside. Something's
It is
happening.
nice outside.
It's not like scorching hot disgusting, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like of
Yeah.
course like we were outside during the day just doing stuff, and it got hot, but it wasn't like unbearable like it normally is. So the pool's still warming up. So hopefully by the time you get there.
It's cool. We'll just like float in the sun.
Pretty much,
you know?
yeah. Stay away from the shade.
Exactly. And then we will
We can sunbathe.
not get out of the pool. It'll be fine.
That was the key yesterday. We're like, oh,
Exactly.
it's really cold when we get off. So basically, we're just a bunch of floating heads in the water. Oh, and then one of my neighbors, oh my gosh, they're not chickens, they're quails. One of their baby quails jumped over our fence and got into our yard. And the only reason we noticed is because my uncle's like, when'd you get a baby chicken? And we're like, what? And then we look and we see a little baby. We thought it was a baby chicken. We didn't know it was a quail. And it just ran behind our shed. So then poor Billy had to like try to catch it. Those things are fast, man, let me tell you. And they kept trying to fly away. So then we like walked it over to our neighbor's house, and we're like, we think your chicken came into our yard. And the guy was like, oh, that's our quail.
I don't think I've ever heard of somebody keeping quail. Like they run so rampantly here. Like I've never heard of somebody just having them as like a pet. Or...
They have a whole batch. Yeah, the lady came out and she's like, oh yeah, like I guess their cage that they had them in had like a little opening, and she's like, I've been chasing the other one in the backyard trying to capture it. She's like, because apparently it was 2 weeks old, and she's like, they're not supposed to be able to fly yet, but I don't know how. This one like parkoured over the wall or something. But yeah, well, it was an eventful day for sure.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Quails are a very interesting breed of bird because while they can fly, it's like they prefer not to.
I don't
you know?
But yeah, she was so sweet. She's like, oh, we have quail eggs. If you ever want any, come over. We're like,
look at you. Getting all fancy.
I know.
Now I have a hookup for quail eggs.
Yeah.
Through you.
So there you go. Yep. Have you ever had quail eggs before?
I have not.
I haven't either.
I probably never will.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, now, but
but I'm wondering like what it would be like to bake with them, or if I were to try and make them into some kind of like Danish or something like that, or like mini quiche. I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah, I'm sure like the baker in you is like
my wheels are spinning.
Yeah,
you know. Oh, but I'm so, speaking of my baking, like I'm so glad that you liked the banana bread that I made.
Loved it. It was so cute. It was so pretty too.
Really?
Yes. I took a picture of it before I dug in.
Oh, good, because I forgot. So I made.
Oh, good.
like 5 or 6 different banana breads yesterday.
Did you? Did you have a bunch of bananas that were gonna go
I
bad, or
did.
why? Okay, there you go. Yep.
I bought like a whole bunch of bananas and I just got very excited. I made Richard banana bread the week before,
Mhm.
and he said it was the best banana bread I'd ever made and that I needed to remember how I made it.
Oh.
And part of the trick is that I used whipping cream instead of buttermilk.
No, either of those things went into banana bread.
I
What?
mean, some kind of dairy product traditionally or dairy substitute.
Yeah.
And so I decided to use whipping cream this time.
Oh.
And because that's what I had in my fridge. I had
Oh.
bought it for when I made macarons. And so I had some left over and I was like, well, I need to use this.
Wow.
So, yeah,
That's
I'm so glad it turned out.
awesome. I know. Yeah, it was delicious. I have to remember to tell Billy that we have some. So I don't
Yes.
eat the whole thing on my own. Or maybe I won't. Who knows? We'll see.
I mean, if he listens to this, depending on
Oh yeah, he'll know. Yeah, he does
how
listen every
fast you eat it and how soon he
Yes.
listens, he may or may not know.
By tomorrow morning, it needs to be gone if I don't want to share.
Oh, but beyond that, I've had a very eventful morning. Like I said, I finished one of my paintings, the most gigantic painting that I think I've
Huge.
ever made so far. It's
That's
like 4 feet by 2
beautiful.
feet. So I'm so excited. I will be putting that on my Instagram later today. So excited
Yay.
because it's been a very long time.
Yay. And it looks gorgeous. It's amazing. It looks beautiful.
So what did I see some matcha in your
Yeah, you
hands?
did.
Is that what you're drinking today?
I went, where the heck did I go? I went somewhere new and I was calling Billy on my way there. I was talking to him and he's like, you need to get something different. He's like, if you have to get 2 drinks,
Why?
just in case. He's like, you always get the same 2 drinks. He's like, I want to hear something different. He's like, matcha or a chai. So then, but I'm like, those are my drinks. That's what I love. But so I tried a new coffee place today. It's over, oh my gosh. I don't know what it's called. I already forgot the name of it. Maybe it's on the cup. Nope, it's not on the cup. Anyways, it's a new place. I think the Aztec mocha. And I don't know what the heck is in this thing. No, like I feel like someone just threw like cayenne pepper in my mouth. Like, you know what's happening to me? Billy's like, you're turning into a white girl. Like, I cannot handle spice anymore. We had jalapenos the other night. We made like a vegan ceviche, and it had jalapenos in it, of course.
Mhm.
But Billy was the one chopping them, and I'm like, Billy, you have to take the seeds out. And he's like, no, we're going to leave them in. So he left all the seeds in, and our mouths were on fire. Literally, both of our mouths were red. Just a red line around our mouth. And then, like, we made a jalapeno, like, margarita yesterday.
Ooh,
And it burned again. And now today, I can't even handle a Aztec mocha. I don't know what's happening to me. Anyway.
I blame Billy.
Yeah, I do too. I blame Billy too. So on the way home, I'm like, I'm gonna get a matcha.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at you.
I know. What are you drinking today?
Well, today I had a nitro cold brew with some almond milk, of course, from Starbucks. Yeah, in honor of this movie, because our movie today is You've Got Mail, and they go to Starbucks
every day
regularly in this movie. But of course, when I was watching this movie in preparation for our episode today, it went ahead and I got a skinny caramel macchiato.
Yeah, that confused me when you sent me that. You're like, oh, in honor of our movie. And I was like, what? Because I hadn't seen it yet. But even when I watched it, I was waiting for someone to do a skinny caramel macchiato. I was looking for it. And then I'm like, wait, they go to Starbucks every day. Okay, now I get it.
Well, Meg Ryan's character orders it. She orders a tall, non-fat, skinny caramel macchiato or something like that. And then they hand her a grande cup.
Oh, I thought it was like a skinny latte.
I had my subtitles on, I swear.
Okay. I need to start doing that every time. Because every time I do notes on a movie, I end up having to turn them on. Because I'm like, what the heck are they saying?
It makes life so much easier.
It does.
I tell you what. Yeah. But I am sad to say, unfortunately, I did not end up drinking that skinny caramel macchiato.
Why?
I did not like it.
You know what? Is it the sugar-free vanilla?
I think so.
I
I think
hate
it's the
it.
sugar-free vanilla.
I decided to try that one. No, I didn't decide. I'm sorry. It was decided for me because they were out of regular vanilla. And randomly, because that's what I used to
No.
order before I started working at Starbucks. I would get caramel macchiatos. And so I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
for old time's sake, let me get a caramel macchiato iced. And they're like, we're so sorry, we're out of regular vanilla, but we have sugar free. And I was like, ugh. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and try it. And it was disgusting. And I drove to the next
So
Starbucks
gross.
and I asked for a regular one. Why didn't you ask for a different drink?
Because I was already home.
Oh man, I would have driven back out. There's one on every corner.
It's right down the street from me,
I
but
know,
still.
yeah. I would have been like, this is disgusting. I paid good money. That drink is probably like what, $7, Kenzie?
Eh. It
Oh,
was
you're
my
too
fault.
nice.
I ordered it.
Who cares? I still would have complained.
I did the same thing today. Like, I went ahead and I got my toes done and I fucked them up because I'm really good at, as soon as I get my nails painted, like somehow, some way, I'm the master at fucking them up. And so, like, I got out of the chair and then I accidentally slipped my toe underneath like the other chair or something like that. And so the nail polish got pushed back.
And you didn't ask them if they can like just touch it up?
I didn't, but I went with Beth and she's like, you should ask him to fix it. And I was like,
Yeah.
but I did it. And she was like, no, just ask him to fix it. So she called him over and she's like, can you please fix this for her?
He's like you're too nice, Kenzie. You're too like no.
I
If you're
know.
still there, I'd be like, oh, do you mind? I've done it before.
It'll be my downfall. But shall we get into You've Got Mail?
Let's do it.
Okay. So You've Got Mail was directed by Nora Ephron. Many people have heard of Nora Ephron. She's done so many movies, whether she's written on directed a movie. She has been crucial to movies like Julie and Julia, Bewitched, When Harry Met Sally, Michael, Mixed Nuts, Sleepless in Seattle, Cookie, and so many more. And she was born in May of 1941. Right in the middle of May. She is a Taurus, but just on the cusp of it. And she actually passed away in June of 2012. And this was after a long disease. Nora Ephron was educated at Wellesley College in Massachusetts. I swear, I lived there. I know how to say it. I promise.
What? You lived in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I lived in Massachusetts for 4 years.
What the heck? Why?
Or 3. Because my parents got divorced and that's where my mom moved to.
Oh, does she have family out there? Is that why?
No. When my dad was in the Navy, we got stationed in Rhode Island and then he was discharged. And then my parents got divorced and my mom moved to Massachusetts because Rhode Island is the smallest state ever. And you can drive across the entire state in like an hour.
Yeah. I always forget how big Arizona is in comparison to a lot of the states on the East Coast.
Oh, I know. My colleagues, like, they can go from like Connecticut to New York in like 2 hours. And I'm like, that is like 3 states over.
Yeah. We're like, if we make it 1 state over in a day.
Right. I'm like, I can make it to San Diego, which is in the southernmost part of California.
6 hours.
In about 5 hours.
I thought it was 5 hours too. And then I navigated it and it says 6 hours now.
No.
I know. What the fudge?
I think it just depends on how fast you drive.
You know what? It may be that, and also, you know how it's always under construction, the 10? So they might be down to 1 lane. So that might be at fault.
Lame sauce.
Agreed.
Anyway, back to Nora. She was an acclaimed essayist, novelist, and she had written many screenplays for several popular films, all featuring strong female characters. And then Ephron made her directorial debut with the comedy This Is My Life, co-scripted by her sister, Delia Ephron. She followed up by directing and co-writing Sleepless in Seattle in 1993. In her most recent book, I Remember Nothing, she ends the collection of essays with 2 lists, what I won't miss and what I will miss. After the lists comes the acknowledgments, which she ends with, and of course, my doctors, because as I mentioned, she was sick for a long time before her passing. So she wanted to give her acknowledgments to her doctors as well.
Oh, that's sweet.
So for You've Got Mail, we have many well-known actors in this movie. Most well-known is probably Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. But we've also got Greg Kinnear, Heather Burns, who, if you've ever watched Miss Congeniality,
that's what
you know who Heather Burns is.
I feel like I haven't seen her in anything else. And I was so shocked to see her in this. I was like, oh my God, it's the April 20-something chick from Miss Just Need a Light Jacket.
Yep.
I was also shocked to see Dave Chappelle too.
I know. I'm always shocked anytime that I see him in anything, honestly.
True. Yeah. A Star is Born. I was like, what? Why are you here? Like, not that it's a bad thing, but I'm like, it just, it seemed so like out of his element.
It does. Like, he's not terribly here for comedic effect either, honestly.
Yeah. He wasn't there for that. He was just there. Yeah.
We got Steve Zahn. And then we've got a smatterings of some other actors and actresses as well. And with that, shall we get into the ratings?
Let's do it. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and give it 10 out of 10. So this one is titled, One of the Most Romantic Movies I've Ever Seen. I've been starved for a great romantic film, and You've Got Mail more than sated my appetite. I'd rank it up there with Casablanca as one of the most romantic movies of all time. Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan have more chemistry than a high school science department. This movie was warm, funny, smart, and sexy. Tom and Meg light up the screen, and Tom Hanks is the perfect hero. The movie was 2 hours long, felt like 10 minutes, and I didn't want it to be over. This is a definite keeper, and I can't wait for it to come out on video so I can watch it again and again.
Okay. The 1 out of 10 is This Ain't No When Harry Met Sally. This 2-hour advertisement for Starbucks and AOL was not only predictable and boring, I found myself utterly frustrated with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks' chemistry. They seemed to be struggling through much of the movie, especially Ryan, who seemed uncomfortable in her role. It seemed obvious that they were acting and that this was a movie. Most frustrating, however, was the plot and writing. After Tom Hanks' character runs Meg Ryan out of business and was continually lying to her, why on earth did Meg Ryan's character give him the time of day? I found myself wanting to yell at the screen, "He's an evil man. Be strong and fight for what you believe." Alas, that did not happen. One of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Okie dokie. Strong feelings.
I think on both accounts.
Yeah, both of them.
All right. So with that, shall we crack into the movie?
Let's.
Okay. So what's lovely about the fact that this is a 1998 film is that we get to see the early love letter, essentially, to the internet. Is the idealization of this is what the future looks like and what technology looks like. Because what we open on is, at first, we're going into a computer screen and we get a variety of clunky technology symbols and sounds and of course, the infamous dial-up tone.
Yep.
And during this title sequence, we also get these like cute, chunky, square block characters that make up New York, essentially. And then it transitions into the real New York, and we fly into Meg Ryan's apartment as the title sequence ends. We close up on Meg Ryan's face as she's sleeping, and we hear a man in the apartment say, "Amazing!" She's woken up to her partner, Frank, who's badgering on about how technology will be the end of civilization as we know it. He is in for a rough surprise if this were a person today.
Yeah. He's not totally wrong.
I mean, I don't think it's the end of our civilization, but the way that he treats it, he goes back to a typewriter.
Oh, yeah.
He has two. He's got a backup.
With a back. He's a little extremist.
Just a smidge. I foresee him becoming one of those people who would definitely be off the grid by like 2003.
Oh, yeah. One of the crazies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't even want to know what his perception would be for Y2K, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So here we meet Meg Ryan's character, Kathleen, and as Frank is continuing to go about his rant, she reminds him that he needs to leave. He's going to be late for work, and she goes to brush her teeth. And as he leaves, she finishes brushing her teeth. She excitedly hears him leave, close the door, and then she runs to the door to check through the peephole whether or not he's going down the stairs and out of the apartment building, essentially. From there, she hops straight to her computer. She starts off the dial-up tone, and she logs into her AOL account under the name Shop Girl. She has a message from an anonymous AOL pen pal, and he's talking about his adorable golden retriever, Brinkley, the cutest dog. Her anonymous pen pal friend is going on about how much he loves fall, and he wants to send her a bouquet of freshly sharpened pencils. And this anonymous pen pal is none other than Tom Hanks as a character of Joe. His partner, Patricia, played by Parker Posey, is in a frantic fury to get out of the house on time, but seems to just constantly be adding more things to her list. But as soon as she gets out of the house, Joe goes straight to his computer to see that he has a new in-mail from Shop Girl.
Love it. Their behavior is so cartoonish in these scenes when they're like watching to see if their partners have left the house, like the way they're walking.
They're like tiptoeing around the corner.
Yep. It reminded me of what is the Tom and Jerry? For some
Oh yes. Oh my gosh.
Like the way they tiptoe over. Oh gosh.
Her message to him relays that she hopes that their friendship is long lasting, even though they don't know each other. Fun note, there's Starbucks literally everywhere throughout this movie, as we mentioned earlier.
Yep, all the Starbucks advertisement.
Yes, everywhere. Here we get a really fun montage of Joe and Kathleen going about and starting their days to the melodious tune of the Cranberries. Joe gets to work at a construction site, and his coworker Kevin, who is the previously mentioned Dave Chappelle, is telling Joe all of the updates on the construction site and notices that Joe is not paying a lick of attention. He even mentions something about how Joe hit a deer, and that's when he's like, "You're not paying attention to anything I just mentioned." That's when Kevin says, "Did you and Patricia get engaged?" And Joe's like, no. I mean, I love Patricia, but no, we didn't get engaged. And then they start to talk shop and they start to talk business. And they say, you know, this is going to be a big box bookstore. And, you know, Kevin is mostly concerned about the response from the neighborhood. He's mostly concerned about picketing and riots. But Joe's like, nope, we're going to butter them up with caffeine and cheap books and discounts. And it's going to be great. Then we transition back to Kathleen. She gets to work. She owns a small bookshop, and it's called The Shop Around the Corner. And her coworker, played by the esteemed Heather Burns that we mentioned previously from Miss Congeniality fame. And Kathleen is chipper as can be. She's smelling everything, smelling Scotch tape even. And that's when Christina's like, okay, what is going on? What is going on with you? You're smelling Scotch tape. And then she asks Kathleen whether or not she's in love. And Kathleen's like, I'm in love. No, I'm not in love. Yes, I'm in love. I'm in love with Frank, of course.
Because both of these people are in what appears to be committed relationships.
At least for some time.
Right? I feel like, I don't know. We'll get into that later. How I feel about it.
So then Kathleen asks if anyone can be unfaithful over email. And then Christina's response is, have you had sex? And then Kathleen's like, no, I don't even know him. Christina's suggestion is, good, don't do it. Because the minute you do it, they lose all respect for you. I feel like that's, generally the advice you give to any woman about sleeping with a man. I mean, isn't that the precedent for not sleeping with somebody on the first date?
Yeah. Yep, that's what we've always been told, right?
Right? Exactly. And then they're going on about the fact that her pen pal is an anonymous person, and they're saying, oh, it could be anybody. It could be the next person who walks in the store, and then all of a sudden their next coworker walks in, and they look at him and they're like, it could even be George, who's played by Steve. And they ask him, they're like, hey, are you online? And he's like, no, why would I do that? That's just another way to be rejected by women. Then Bertie, who used to be friends with Kathleen's mom, who we find out owned the store, and that's why Kathleen owns the store, because she passed away earlier. She was really good friends with her mom. She walks in and she says, it's time to open up. And then Joe, we transition to him. He's in a high-rise office and he's talking about construction. There's an older gentleman and then there's an even older gentleman. The oldest gentleman says, your father's getting married again. And then we find out that all three gentlemen in this office are related. The older gentleman is Joe's father, who is getting married, and the oldest gentleman is Joe's grandfather. And they all run the big box chain store that they've been referring to this whole time. So as we're in transition, we see various snippets of Kathleen and Joe's conversations going back and forth and back and forth. Something about a butterfly on a subway, something about flour dust in the air next to a bakery, and something about Pride and Prejudice, because it's Kathleen's favorite book and she's read it like 200 times. George walks past the coming soon construction sign and notices that it's a Fox bookstore that's going to be just down the street from around the corner bookstore. So then we see Kathleen, Christina, and George all gawking at the construction that's happening for the Fox books. Christina and George are reasonably very depressed about this news, but Kathleen is looking on the silver side of things.
She's very optimistic about all of this. Well, everybody else is like, woman, you're screwed. She's like, no, we'll be fine.
So we have completely different services. We can do what they can't. We have knowledge. Their service people have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. We're all about the customer service.
Exactly. I'm like, I get that to an extent.
Yeah. However, but at the end of the day, it's all about the money.
Yeah. So then we switch to Kathleen continuing to say these great benefits that they have over Fox books. Mm-hmm. And she's relaying them to Bertie over lunch, who is obviously very skeptical about her optimism as she continues to eat her sandwich. Later that night at home, Frank is telling Kathleen that the shop around the corner is going to be responsible for turning back the Industrial Revolution once they're done with Fox books. Kathleen thinks that is the sweetest thing she's ever heard him say to her. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, I was confused about that too. I'm like, I feel sad for her. That's the sweetest thing he's ever said to her.
Rightness. This man is so self-absorbed in his own world and in his own lism, essentially, that like everything has to relate to that.
Right. He's not a lovable character for sure.
No, not under any circumstances. He gets very excited about the typewriter that he's just brought back. She goes over to the other side of the table and she reveals the plastic on top of the second typewriter. And he's like, but I just needed a backup. And then she's like, What about the one that was over at your apartment?
Oh, 3.
He has 3 typewriters.
At least that we know of. That she knows of.
This man is in love with the clickety-clack of the typewriter.
Can you imagine, especially you with your migraines, if you had to listen to that all day, every day?
No. It would not work. Nope. I'm saying no to that sooner than it can be said yes. So then she starts to question herself and she starts to doubt herself, as well as her career. She basically took over this store after her mom passed away, and so she's starting to doubt herself. And then all of a sudden, Frank actually does start to comfort her, and he starts to be very sweet about it. But then he goes back to being Frank, and he sits straight down at his typewriter.
Yeah.
Because he gets inspired to type. And he types out his little inspiration to comfort her, and he types it out for her, and he hands it straight to her.
Like, I know. Like, what is she supposed to do with that? Like,
hang it on her mirror. I don't know. It's her new affirmation. She's supposed to just say it every day, you know? Later, she's messaging NY152, which is Joe's AOL screen name. And she's questioning if she's only where she's at in her career because she's afraid to step out or that she just feels responsible. And then the next day, we see that Joe is on a boat and we see 2 children run up to him. And 2 women follow with the 2 children. One of them is Jillian, who is soon to be his stepmother, who is getting married to his dad. And she's very handsy with Joe.
Yeah, she is. She's touchy-feely.
I don't know why she's with his dad if she clearly wants to make out with Joe.
She wants the best of both worlds. She wants it all.
So Matthew, the little boy of the 2 children, because there's a boy and a girl, is Jillian's son. And then Joe asks if the kids are ready to go out on the boat, and they say no, because they're so not interested. And then we see that instead of going out onto the boat, they go to what looks like a Thanksgiving street party instead. So like a street,
like a fair festival.
Block party. That's what I was thinking of.
There you go.
Yep, like a block party. We heard that it was fall earlier, but now we have a sense that it's around Thanksgiving time. And then we get to see Tom Hanks relive his big days. So he's playing around with all the toys. He's playing with the kids. He's going down a slide. Like, he's really chumming it up.
Yeah, he is.
As they're walking, they're coming up to the shop around the corner, and the kids are very excited because outside of the shop, there's a sign that says Storybook Lady. And as we go inside, we see that Kathleen is reading fairy tales to groups of children. For today's story, she's reading Boy by Ronald Dahl. Kathleen is sharing different types of books with Annabelle, who's the little girl who's with Joe, and she exclaims that she is Joe's aunt. And Kathleen is shocked by this, but Joe's like, yes, she's my aunt. And then Kathleen asks Matthew, are you his uncle, grandfather? And Matthew, who's the little boy, says, no, I'm his brother. And so Annabelle explains that she's his grandfather's daughter and Matthew is his father's son.
That is so disturbing and gross. To think that that old man had intercourse with someone young enough who could bear children. Reminds me of, you know, that famous actor who just recently announced he had a child.
Oh my gosh. I was literally just talking about this with somebody.
We're like, what the fudge?
I know that, like, Jeff Goldblum, he's in his 60s and he has 2 relatively small kids, like under 10.
I mean, like, technically someone can be in their 40s, I guess, and have children.
Yeah, but you're in your 40s. You're not in your 60s and beyond.
That's true. But, like, what's his face is like almost 80. So there's like at least a 40-year gap. What the fudge balls?
See, like, this is why women have menopause, Men need their own version of menopause.
They really
where they
do.
can stop reproducing.
They need to, because that is just ridiculous. Like, some of these men aren't gonna live to see their children become adults. They're just not gonna make it.
Especially since men don't live as long as women do, just on
Oh, yeah.
average.
Yeah.
So then they get into a conversation and it becomes a little bit tense because Kathleen is talking about Fox Books and Joe understands and very intentionally does not say that his last name is Fox. But Matthew, of course, then starts to spell out Fox as she's talking about Fox Books because that's the only thing he knows how to spell because he's maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah.
She's like, spell cat. And he's like, Fox.
Yeah. That reminds me of like this cute video of like, it's like a tiny little kid spelling something out. And then the parents like, what is that spell? He was like spelling, it was so random. I don't remember, but it was like noodles. And then they're like, what is that spell? And then he's like, peanut butter. They're like, yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
I do believe peanut butter is many more letters than noodles, but A for effort.
Right. There you go. I want that kid's confidence.
What I would do with like a 5-year-old's confidence.
Man, what would that be like? How different our world would look.
Right? So as Joe is trying to steer the conversation away from Fox Books to try and make sure that he doesn't blow his cover, that he happens to be Joe Fox and, you know, on the verge of putting her out of business, he comments on a picture of Kathleen's mom, specifically because his grandpa had the hots for Kathleen's mom back in the day. So his grandpa mentioned something about how whimsical or how she had a presence about her. And so he mentions that, and he says that he could just tell by the picture behind her. And then George rings up all the books that he was grabbing for the kids, and he says that it's $73.
That sounds about right. I feel like this man is very well off. What is he complaining about? I don't get it.
This is not the first box store he's opening. They've made that very clear. Like, he is well off.
Yes, he's doing just fine.
But of course, Kathleen, this will be her character flaw throughout the entire movie. She's absolutely none the wiser to anything that's happening around her.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She's very oblivious throughout this.
She is. Movie. I can't tell if she's oblivious or naive or both. Oh my gosh, I just feel so bad for her.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we next see the opening of Fox and Sons Books. And here we see another montage of everybody coming in. They're going through all the different books, all the different aisles. They're drinking coffee from the different cafe, which is a gorgeous cafe, by the way. Mm-hmm. This is like actually the perfect film for you and me as far as coffee drinkers are concerned. So many people are buying books. Like,
right? Like, this place looks amazing. I would love to spend the day there. I'm like, where can we get one of these? Like, this is like not a Starbucks, a Barnes and Noble, like on steroids, this place.
Oh my gosh, it's got 5 levels.
Right? I mean, like, I know it's in New York and they have to go up instead of wide, but still, like, this place is massive. And that cafe did look amazing. So I felt bad for loving this place. I feel like we should hate it. We probably as viewers should have been like, oh, F this place. But low key, I was like, oh my God, like, I want to be there.
I mean, I really love the small little bookshop too. Speaking of which, to any of our listeners who would like to support local bookshops, what you can do is you can go to bookshop.org, and anything that you purchase from bookshop.org, all of your purchases raises money for local bookshops. But you can also then look up bookshops that are small bookshops in your area and then go to those different bookshops and purchase your books from there. So that's my plug for bookshop.org.
Ooh, love it.
Just wanted to put that in there too. So anyway, then as everybody is going over to Fox Books, we go to the shop around the corner, and Birdie is being very realistic. And she says that they're $1,200 less than they were this week last year. And Kathleen is very optimistic. And she says, this whole thing's going to blow over. This is just new. Yeah. You know, people are just taking it in because it's new and it's fancy and it's novelty. But Christina and George are frankly very concerned.
I know. They're probably like already looking for other jobs at this point.
Right? Oh my gosh. And then George leaves. He just flat out leaves.
He's like, I'm out. Can you imagine that confidence? Only a guy would. Only a guy. I'm done.
Only a guy.
Like, bye, guys.
But as he leaves, Christina and Kathleen go to the window. And as they go to the window, they see a woman looking in. And Kathleen notices her and she recognizes her. And she says, Miranda. And so she brings Miranda in. And Miranda is so concerned. She's like, oh no, how are you guys doing? Are you guys going under? What's happening? And Kathleen, ever the optimist, says, no, we're doing just fine. Don't worry about it. Are you still going to have your book signing here? What date can we book you for? And she's like, are you guys going to be open in January? And she's like, yes, we're going to be fine.
Well, the place is empty also. Like there's like not a soul in there. She's like, no, we're great. We're doing phenomenal.
She's like, let me know what I can do. I will support rallies. We can get these organized. We'll have the nut over at the Observer who raves about his typewriter write about this. And then all of a sudden Kathleen's like, she's talking about Frank. The only person left in Manhattan who has a typewriter. Yeah. Nonetheless, 3.
He has all the typewriters.
He just gathered them all up. That's what happened. He stole them from everybody else who could have potentially had a typewriter. So later on, Frank and Kathleen go to a party and she mentions the fact that Miranda called him a nut. So they're going to a party and just so happens Joe and Patricia are there. Patricia asks Joe to get her a new drink and he notices Kathleen right away. And so he's trying to be very sly about it, trying to avoid her like the plague. And then as he's trying to get her a drink, he's got his hand up. He's trying to make sure he's not seen. Kathleen, of course, goes up to the bar to get herself her first drink. There's a person in between them. That person, of course, leaves. And then she sees him and she's like, oh, Joe, hey. He just plays it cool and he's like, oh, sorry, I got to get my girlfriend's drink back over to her. And he runs away. And then somebody comes over to Kathleen and says, oh, I can't believe you were speaking to Joe Fox. And she is dumbfounded. She's like, what? How could I have been talking to Joe Fox? She goes over and she finds him by the food table because that's where most conversations happen. And as they both pick up a plate, she starts to confront him and he makes some kind of reference to The Godfather.
There are multiple Godfather references throughout this movie. Speaking of which, I have never seen The Godfather. Have you?
Same.
Oh, okay. Mm-mm. Apparently everybody has.
No, you know what? It's on my list of things to watch, like the whole Godfather saga, you know, but
there's so many, aren't there?
I think there are actually 3.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a lot more.
Supposedly the second one's the best. The first one, of course, is the original. The second one's the best, and I don't know anything about the third one. But that's what I've heard.
Okay. I guess maybe one day we'll see.
We'll get to it one day. So then they begin to argue with one another over business and then how to eat caviar at a party. And then ultimately who's going to stay in business. You know, the fact that she's a small bookshop owner. He's a big box bookstore owner. And then Frank comes over to Kathleen to defend her. And then Patricia comes over and she just starts to gawk at Frank. She's so excited to be talking to Frank.
Yeah, she's totally fangirling over this guy.
She is. She's like, everything is so fantastic. So later that night, after everybody's gone to their own separate houses, Joe and Patricia are going to bed, and he's still stewing over the conversation that him and Kathleen had, and Patricia falls right to sleep. She's like Richard. Richard will just go straight to sleep the second his head hits the pillow.
The moment Billy's eyes are closed, he starts snoring. I'm like, how? How do you sleep so quickly?
Like, I think it took me 40 minutes to fall asleep last night. And then I woke up at 2 for no reason and then couldn't go back to sleep. So.
Oh, that's awful.
So dumb. Anyway, so Joe can't sleep. So he hits the computer and he starts to write to Shop Girl. He says, do you ever feel like you've become the worst version of yourself? And he says, anytime that anybody spites him, he has to pass a zinger. He has to be the person with the last word. And she responds that she knows exactly what he means. But anytime that she's provoked, she just goes completely blank, tongue-tied. And then she just stews on it for days, trying to come up with a perfect comeback. And then he offers, wouldn't it be great if I could just give you all of my zingers? And asks, do you think we should meet? And at the sight of that, she shuts her computer down. So then we're on to the next montage. I forgot how many montages are in this movie.
A lot. It's a 90s rom-com, so, I mean, it's a requirement.
Most of the montages that I'm used to are usually like clothing changes or like a makeover montage. Mm-hmm. So I like these montages. These are fun. So this montage, you see the two of them constantly like running into the same areas and then constantly trying to avoid each other. Like Kathleen will run into an area, see Joe, and then constantly try and like back out and run away. We'll see Joe run into an area, see her, and then back out, run away. And then last, we see them in a grocery store. Kathleen sees him. She's quickly trying to grab her stuff, seeing where he is, trying to duck and weave. But then she gets in line, trying to pay for her groceries, casually looking over her shoulder to make sure that she can see him, but hopefully he doesn't see her. And then as she's getting rung up and she's about to pay, she realizes this is a cash-only line. Never heard of this in my life.
I've seen like some registers are cash only, but like there was a full-on line for the cash. How many people like have cash on hand? Maybe back then, maybe, but still, that's a lot of people.
Becomes a gigantic to-do. Like the cashier's like, cash only. She's trying to hand her this card and she's like, please, 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 just this one time. Like, I'm so sorry. I did not have any cash with me and I wasn't paying attention. And then people behind her are giving her grief beyond reason. And then all of a sudden Joe hears what's happening and he steps in and he starts to talk to the cashier and he's like, oh, your name is Rose. You're so pretty. And he's like, you know, I see this credit card machine. So you can take the credit cards. And he offers to pay for her groceries. And she says, I don't need your money. And then he says, well, can you, Rose, please swipe the credit card then? And so then Rose does. And you had a comment about that.
I have like 3 comments, I think.
Do it.
So one, Rose, what was that accent that they made her do?
I don't know.
Because she's the chick from Grey's Anatomy. I forgot her name.
Oh, is she?
Yes. She was a main character. She probably died off at one point. Who knows? Anyway, but the accent that they made her do just because she was, I'm assuming, a colored woman.
Right. She was some kind of Latina, it looked like.
Yeah. So that caught me off guard. And then 2, Tom Hanks is not a very, like, traditionally attractive man.
No.
And so I was like, nothing he said was charming at all.
No.
Like, it just felt so wrong coming from him. And then 2, like, I don't, how entitled to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong spot, but can you please go ahead and do this for me? If I were in a cash only line and I get to the front, I would have been like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let me go to the freaking card checkout line or whatever. Like, I would never like start a scene like that. Oh my gosh. And of course, I'm 100% you wouldn't either. We would just step out of line like a normal person. Like, okay, I'm sorry, guys. Sorry.
I feel so bad because she already rang up all of her groceries. So then you have to void out the entire transaction, you know? So you just did all of that work. And
yeah,
it's a whole thing. I thought it was very condescending. And then I thought it was so weird that like he leaves and Rose is all smitten with him, but then as soon as it comes back to Kathleen, everybody just gives her the stink eye.
I don't.
This is wild.
I know. I don't get people.
But she gets out of there as fast as humanly possible.
Yes.
So then we transition to a Fox family gathering, it looks like it's sometime around Christmas time, potentially, or some type of holiday gathering. And we see Annabelle singing for the family to the piano.
Annie.
I have no idea the song. Oh, is it? Okay.
Wait.
I wasn't paying attention.
It was Annie. You've never seen Annie?
No.
What? I don't know what the name of the song is, but it's like, it's Annie. Oh my gosh. That's craziness. There's like 3 or 4 different versions for every generation.
I know of Annie via the Shirley Temple version, but that's it. I haven't actually seen it.
That's wild. Yeah, I don't know what the name of the song was, but yeah, that's what she was singing. A very interesting version. She's a kid. She's a kid. But you know what? So was Annie. There's no excuse for
Exactly. Shirley Temple hit those notes like Julie Andrews.
Oh no.
Best part about this whole scene is that we get even more confirmation that Jillian is a horrendous stepmother, because as the performance is going on, Jo is sitting next to Jillian and she starts to run her hand up Joe's leg. And he rightly gets very uncomfortable about this and gets off the couch and moves next to Patricia, who's sitting at the table.
I love how like the sexual harassment in this movie is just like brushed off like it's nothing.
I'm just like, oh gosh, what is happening here?
I know, this would not today pass.
No. No. So then we transition to Christina and Kathleen and the rest of the shop around the corner family, and they're all singing around Bertie playing the piano. Then we see Bertie walking down the New York streets, and they're peppered with Christmas lights, so we see that it's officially Christmas time. She then sees that in the Fox bookstore window, Miranda is going to be featured there. So we start to see Miranda's loyalty change hands.
She's following that money.
I mean, girl's got to
do what she's got to do. Yeah. Can't blame her.
That was our theme last week too. Kathleen is decorating a Christmas tree in her store window, and she is voicing her message to NY152. And she's saying to him that she misses her mother, especially during this time of year, and she always does. But this year, she really wishes that she could really ask her for advice on what to do next. NY152 really wants to help her. And as she's home now and she's typing back a message, she gets an IM invitation. He says, "I thought you'd be on right now," and says that he'd really like to give her advice on what she's going through. And she says flat out, no. And he asks, "Is it about love?" And she says, "No. Would be cute if it was, though, but it's about business." And he says, "Great. I'm a great businessman." And he asks, "What's your business?" And she says, nope. We already said we're not going to get into specifics. And he says, "Well, if I can't help you with any specifics, there's only one thing I can tell you. Go to the mattresses." And she's like, "What does that even mean?" And he's like, "It's from The Godfather. The answer to anything in life always comes from The Godfather. And in terms of business, you go to the mattresses. It's business. It's nothing personal. You have to fight. You have to fight to the death." She gets super amped up. And here is where Frank comes in, and she stows away her laptop really quickly, like most people do. And she asks if he can write the article about the store. And he says that he will. So next we see at the store, Kathleen is shadowboxing by herself. And everybody is at the store, and they're all talking about the buzz about her being in the little store, taking on the giant Fox books. And there are news outlets showing up outside, and we start to see picket lines outside of Fox books. We see Kathleen giving a speech, and then we see her get interviewed by the news. And it's so funny because we see Kevin and Joe watching this news interview from the gym treadmills. And during the interview, we cut to a very small segment on Joe Fox's response to her interview. And it's a very short segment that just says, "We sell cheap books. Sue me." And that's all they took from his segment.
I was like, oh my
God. So they're trying to make him seem very uncaring and callous.
Yeah.
So the next interview that we see is Frank on TV with a woman, and they're talking a little bit about the store, but then they also talk a little bit about Frank. And that's when Kathleen notices that the interviewer is coming on to Frank and that he is sweating and starts to flirt back with her. And he's trying to play it off.
That was an awkward interview. It was clearly obvious that they were both flirting. I'm like, this is very unprofessional.
Right? All of a sudden, Kathleen's like, is she sweating? But this is one of those other examples of Frank being like an anti-technologist, like extremist.
This man is bonkers.
Very intense. So we're back to the shop after closing, and Kathleen asks Bertie, the publicity hasn't made the slightest bit of difference in our sales, has it? And Bertie says, why don't we ask her mother for some help? And so Bertie has a picture of Kathleen's mom in a locket, and she asks her for some help on what to do next. And she says she has no idea. And then she goes out on her merry way. So later, Kathleen asks NY152 for help, and then asks if he still wants to meet up. From here, we see Joe and Kevin walking down the street on the way to where Joe and Kathleen are going to meet. And Joe begins to freak the fuck out. He is panicking, predominantly on whether or not she's going to be cute. That's his biggest concern. He's like, what if she's not cute? What if she's not cute? What if she's ugly? Like, he's like, I adore her. She's adorable. She's the cutest person I've ever talked to. But what if she's not cute?
Oh, Lord. Like, he's such eye candy himself.
I know. So they reach the cafe, and he can't get himself to go inside. So he asks Kevin to look in the window for him and just look for a woman with a rose and a book and let him know whether or not she's cute. And Kevin takes a look, and he says, she looks a bit like Kathleen Kelly. And if I recall correctly, you thought that she was pretty cute. And he's like, well, if you don't like Kathleen Kelly, you ain't going to like this girl, because she is her. So then Joe runs up the stairs, sees her, and then has the realization that it is her, and defeatedly walks away. So from that point, we see Kathleen inside the cafe. She's just sitting, waiting, taking chairs hostage from other people being able to take them.
Yeah.
And then, just when we thought that Joe would never come inside, he does. He comes in. He's his overly charming self. And he comes over and he says, would you mind if I sit down? And she says, actually, I do. I do mind if you sit down. Then he sees that she's got Pride and Prejudice with her, and he makes fun of it. He makes fun of the whole thing with the background knowledge that he has about what she loves about Pride and Prejudice. And then the waiter asks if he'll have anything. She says he's not staying, but he orders anyway. Then she insults him, and he continues to make a jab at her. And meanwhile, she has absolutely no idea that he's NY152. After a while, she just begs him to leave. So he gets up, and he goes to the table behind her.
I love how, like, after she begs him to leave and he actually gets up to leave, she, at least her facial expression, looks shocked. Like, she kind of, like, regretted that decision. I'm like, girl, you've been begging him to leave. Why are you now?
I thought it was more so like she never thought he would actually listen to her.
Oh, maybe it was that too.
In that he actually, like, took her plea seriously.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he broke that plea by sitting directly behind her.
Yeah.
So Joe then plays off the idea, knowing that he's NY152, and he knows now that she's shop girl and that they were supposed to meet tonight. He makes fun of her, essentially, quote unquote, that the man who she's meeting is not her partner, her Frank. And then he continues to glom onto the idea that the guy who she's supposed to meet, quote unquote, stood her up. So then she claims that Joe is nothing like the man who she's supposed to meet, and that NY 152 must have a reason. So eventually, Joe leaves. She says some nasty things to him to finally get him to leave. And then eventually, Kathleen leaves too. And she gets home to check her AOL. And she sees she has no mail, no excuse, no explanation for why he wasn't there. And then Joe gets home, and Patricia is just jabbering on. I don't think this woman ever stops talking.
No.
And I have no idea ever what she's saying, honestly.
Yeah, I never know what she's talking about. She's talking just to talk at this point.
So Joe is telling Kevin about the interaction. He's trying to convince himself that he doesn't like her. And then Kathleen gets the shop around the corner to tell Christina, and Christina asks how it went, and they start to brainstorm like what horrible, horrible thing could have befallen NY 152. And they're like, maybe he had an accident. Maybe he's in the hospital. And then, of course, George picks up the newspaper and he's like, I think it's probably a good thing that you didn't meet him. Because just a few blocks away, the police apprehended the rooftop killer. So it's probably him. And he couldn't make it because he was arrested.
All the extreme possibilities. Yeah. So she's choosing to remain her same naive self and just complete denial that she was stood up.
Mm-hmm. Which technically she wasn't. He just lied to her.
True. Which everybody even tells her, oh, you got stood up.
Even he tells her.
Yep.
I'm like, what an ass. So then she goes home later and she starts writing to NY 152. And she says, why weren't you there? Instead of you, the most horrible person in my life showed up. And I was finally able to say the right thing, a horrible thing to him. And I've been beating myself up ever since then for it. So Joe reads it. And she ends her email to him that so far they've been talking about more nothings than somethings. But all of their nothings have meant so much more than so many somethings. So Joe turns off the computer, he gets up, and he goes about his day, but he continually comes back to his computer, just looking at it. I think he does this about 15 times.
Yeah.
Until he finally comes back to his computer, he turns it back on, and he starts to email her back. He begins by saying, I was in Vancouver. He changes it to, he was in a meeting with an electricity outage. And then he keeps adding more and more excuses to that.
Yeah.
And then removes it all after Brinkley, his dog, gives him a very disappointed gaze.
A very judgmental gaze. Yeah.
So finally, Joe takes off his suit jacket and he tries again. He simply says, I can't tell you what happened, but please forgive me. He says, I'm sure what you said was provoked and deserved. Don't feel bad about it. And someday I'll explain everything. And that was pretty much it.
Just like that, she forgave him. A complete stranger.
Pretty much. So Christina and Kathleen go over to Birdie's and they discuss that they are making the decision to close the store officially. And Birdie says, that's fantastic news. I'm so proud of you. It's so brave of you to choose this. You're going to give yourself a chance to do something new. And at first, Kathleen has been so scared to do this because she feels like a failure, because she feels like she's needed to keep the store going because it was something that her mom did. And she feels like she couldn't be brave beforehand. But the fact that Birdie sees it as part of her being brave, and the fact that, you know, Birdie was part of this with her mom for so long, you know, really is so sweet of her.
I know. I love how, though, I think it was Birdie that was like, I'm sure you feel like a failure or like a loser. And she's like, oh, but you're not. This is a good thing.
Right. Well, and it's like Birdie really knows who she is, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's just her being insightful.
Yeah.
And then she says, if you need money, let me know. I'm rich.
Yeah. As they're having like proper tea. She's like, have a sandwich.
Yeah. Oh, and then they start to talk about a time when Birdie was in love. And she's like, oh, I fell in love once, but it wasn't meant to be. He ran Spain and then he died.
I know, just casually. Oh, he ran Spain.
Next, we see Kathleen and Frank going to the movies as they're discussing Birdie's previous love life. And once they get to the movies, Frank says that he could never be with somebody who didn't take politics as seriously as him. I can't understand exactly why they're together in the first place, but all of a sudden, Kathleen says she didn't vote in the last mayoral election. Yeah. And he says that he forgives her.
She's like, you forgive me? I wasn't apologizing.
Exactly. So she gets up and she walks out. Frank then apologizes to her, and they all of a sudden are just like, okay, we need to talk. So they go to a cafe, and Frank is like, okay, I'm so sorry, I have to do this. And so basically he's trying to break up with her, and she just starts laughing, and she's like, you don't love me. And he's like, no. And she's like, that's great, I don't love you. Oh my God. And they laugh about it. Yeah. They're just laughing at each other because they're both like, we seem so right for each other, and yet we don't love each other. And this is great. And then she asks him if there's somebody for him, if there's somebody else. And she's like, oh, is it that Sydney person from the interview? And he's like, nothing's happened. You know, she's been on my mind ever since. And, you know, and then he asks, well, what about you? Is there anybody for you? And she's like, not really, more so the dream of somebody.
Oh my gosh. I love how they're casually like, oh, so like, have you been seeing someone else behind my back? Like, no, like it's nothing.
At least they're very, I don't know.
They're open about it.
Yeah. It's not a bad breakup.
It sounds like they're almost encouraging it.
It's so funny. Next, we see that the shop around the corner is closing, and there are huge sales going on. Like everything's 40% off essentially. And so many people are coming in and purchasing anything, basically anything that's not nailed down. It's pretty much game. So many people are coming in and they're purchasing so much. And then they're telling Kathleen how much her mother meant to them. And afterwards, Kathleen goes for a walk, and she decides to take a look around Fox Books. There are a bunch of people inside. And then she goes into the children's section. She takes a seat at a tiny table, and Joe, very creepily across the way, is taking a gander as to what she's doing there.
I don't think he ever approaches her, right? He just watches her from afar.
We got Tom Hanks on one side all the way across like this giant globe, essentially. Yeah. And then we've got Kathleen on the other side sitting at this teeny ass table.
A kid's table. Because she's in the kids section.
Yep. So we see a customer ask a sales associate, somebody told me that I needed to get these boots, these shoe books for my kid. And he's like, do you have an author? And she's like, I don't know. And all of a sudden, Kathleen chimes in. She gives them the author's name, the different books of the series. She says the ballet shoes are my favorite. I'd start with that one. And just rambles on and on and on about these kids' book series.
And she's crying. Did you ever watch the Mindy show? The Mindy Kaling show?
No.
You didn't? I think you... But, the salesman, he was one of the main characters in that. And Danny. She played.
Oh, really?
He plays her like lover in it. And he's hilarious. So when I saw him in this, I'm like, oh my gosh.
I love that.
He was also in, did you watch Sharp Objects? I think it was with the...
I did not. No.
That was a good one. I think it was on HBO Max.
I read the book.
I really liked what you...
I'm interested to watch it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet because I have this thing about... Like, I've read so many books, but I've not actually watched the movie or the show about it. But I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, do I watch it? Do I not watch it? Do I watch it? Do I not watch it?
I don't know.
But I really do want to watch, like, Gone Girl.
Oh. From what I hear from people who have read the book and watched the movie, they said that the movie is really good. Still.
See, and that's what I heard too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I
like
want to watch it.
So I suggest you do that.
We'll get on that someday.
I know, right? One day.
One day. Over the rainbow.
For a list of like thousands of shows and movies we need to watch.
Right? Right now I'm watching Will and Grace. So that's pretty much taking up all of my mental space. So next, after she's helped the customer find the perfect book, we see that Joe and Patricia are in a cab, and Patricia tells Joe that she wants to hire on Kathleen as a children's book editor because Patricia works at a book publishing company. And then as they're going on, Joe is saying, no, that's not a good idea. No, that's not a good idea. And why would you want to do that? And then Patricia keeps reminding Joe, you're the whole reason why Kathleen is out of a business. You're the whole reason why Kathleen doesn't have a job.
Yeah.
And so then as Joe and Patricia get to the elevator, it stops and they're stuck. Literally one of my worst nightmares.
Is it?
I am scared of elevators.
Oh no.
Yep. Elevators scare me. It's one of the many reasons why I can never live in New York. I go there occasionally for work, but I can never live there because I don't want to be in elevators for that long, especially to go that high all the time, especially when they break down so frequently.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I've ever been stuck in an elevator before.
I've not either, and I don't want to. It's not high on my to-do list. So anyway, they get stuck in the elevator, and several of the passengers start to freak out, much like I would. So there are 4 of them in there, including the elevator operator. There's Patricia and Joe, who are fighting over the fact that Patricia wants to hire Kathleen, and Joe is in denial about the fact that he put her in this situation. And then there's a neighbor who has a dog.
It's nice company, but I love how Joe takes over to like handle the situation over the actual elevator operator. He literally steps aside.
He seems very nervous.
Yeah. Maybe he's new to this whole thing because you would think like, oh, this happens all the time. I would know what to do. I would not panic. But no, apparently Joe decides to take charge.
He's very panicked. He's a super panicked elevator operator.
Yeah, I think a new line of work.
He makes a phone call. They're stuck in that elevator for at least an hour.
Yeah.
And after the phone call is made, he tells the operator, hey, you need to call 911, ask for the fire department. We're stuck in the elevator. Send help. Thanks. Mm-hmm. So then the elevator operator says, okay, we need to jump. The elevator thinks that we have people in here. And if it thinks that we don't have people in here, then maybe the doors will open. And I think this is the stupidest idea ever. Like, that's how you plummet into the basement.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, what? Like, I was so confused. But do some people actually think that? Or
I hope not.
I hope not either. Because, like,
I hope not.
Is it like a sensor thing?
I don't know.
I don't know either, but it does sound very stupid.
I hate when people jump in elevators when I'm there. I'm not afraid to punch people. So anyway, after some time passes, they're all sitting on the floor of the elevator and they start talking about what they'll do once they're out of the elevator. So the woman with the dog talks first. Then the elevator operator talks, and he says that if he ever gets out of there, then he'll marry a person. And then Joe's about to say something, but then Patricia cuts in and says something very dumb. But that's when Joe realizes Patricia's not for me.
She's not for me. Oh, the Tic Tacs. She's
is that what it is?
For her Tic Tacs. She couldn't find any. But also, like, yeah, getting stuck in an elevator is scary, panicky, but like, it's not life or death for these people to be having like all of these realizations. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to live with regret.
If I could plummet into the basement, I think it could. I am wary.
Oh, okay.
But I will take you on that. I will have your voice in my head if I ever get stuck in an elevator.
Kenzie, you'll be out in an hour. You're fine.
So with that, he and Brinkley then move out and they go to the boat to sleep. And that's where they live for the next few weeks.
I didn't understand that either. Why didn't they just go to a hotel?
I don't either. It's like he's broke.
I know. Like, he could have a nice, like, suite. Like, I don't understand these men.
Maybe he's just frugal. I don't know.
Maybe, maybe that's, yeah.
I mean, that's what they say about rich people. In order to keep your money, you gotta not spend your money.
Yeah, they're the worst tippers. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's how they stay rich.
Kathleen then emails NY152 and tells him that her store is closing. She takes one last run through her store and then she closes it. And she claims that she feels like her mother's died all over again. Kathleen is walking down the street away from the store, and we get some sad music. Next, Joe is walking Brinkley alongside the Hudson, and he sees a limo pull up and his dad get out. As it turns out, his dad didn't end up marrying Jillian. And we see his dad is staying on his much bigger boat, and he has tied Joe's boat to his boat. I think it says Fox 2 and then Fox 3 on the smaller boat.
Oh, I didn't. I thought it said Fox, but I didn't notice the number.
Yep, the bigger boat has Fox 2 on it for his dad, and then the smaller boat has Fox 3 for Joe. Oh, while Joe's making him a drink, he comes to find out that after every single one of his dad's failed like relationships, his dad's always come back to this boat to basically get settled back into life, essentially. And so after his relationship with his mom was over, then he moved on to this next person who was Joe's nanny. And then after that relationship was over, he moved on to this next relationship who was an ice figure skater who also happened to be Joe's nanny. And then he was on with Jillian, and he says, you know who she ran off with? The nanny.
Sounds like karma.
Right? So then they're sitting down and they're talking, and his dad's talking about getting back out there and finding somebody single. And Joe says, you think it's really all that easy to find somebody who's single who fills your heart with joy? And his dad says, don't be ridiculous. Have you ever met somebody who fits that description? And Joe suddenly looks at himself internally and it's like, not yet. So the next day we see Joe with flowers, and he comes over to Kathleen's apartment building, and she says that she has a cold and she tells him to go away, but he goes up in her apartment building with somebody else. So while she's talking out of the intercom system, he's already inside the building and she doesn't know it. So he knocks on the door and she is startled as she quickly cleans up and she lets him in, and she cannot for the life of her figure out why he's there. She mentions that she got offered a job by his Patricia, and he says that she's his former and that they're no longer together, and it happened about 3 weeks ago or something of that nature. And he said that he brought her flowers and that she should really be sitting down and resting. And so he makes her some tea, and he says that George says hi because apparently he works at Fox Books now in the children's section and is only hiring people with PhDs. So Joe brought her daisies because he knows that that's her favorite flower. And just as they begin to quarrel again, they're slowly trying to get water underneath the bridge. And then he starts to talk about Pride and Prejudice, and then says that he's sorry and that, what happened with the bookstore wasn't personal. And she says, how is it not personal? It might not have been personal to you, but it was personal to me. And for like the 100th time, she says, why are you here? He responds, I know this is going to sound crazy. I want to be your friend. And I know that that's impossible, but sometimes you want the impossible. He inquires again about the guy from the cafe who stood her up and asks why she doesn't go off with him since she's crazy about him. And then she responds that she doesn't really know him. And he says that they should meet. And of course, he's just starting to orchestrate things and manipulate this. And this is, I think, the last 15 minutes of the movie. Mm-hmm. Just as she's about to say something, he stops her and tells her, let me stop you before you say something that you'll hate yourself for years to come. And then he's off.
And in that moment, I feel like she begins that she maybe had a hunch that it could have been him. But then again,
right?
it's her, so she probably was still had
Oh
no
my
idea.
gosh. Absolutely no idea. None whatsoever. Like, he keeps hinting that it's him.
Yes,
Like, he keeps bringing so many things that
like
they've
little
talked about.
details that like that, they've only talked about, and so I'm like,
Mhm.
"Come on, girl."
Like, don't be this dumb. So then she writes to NY 152 again, and she says, we should meet. And he says, yes, but I'm in the middle of a project that needs tweaking. So she sits at a Starbucks, and then he shows up and he starts to give her advice about his own messages. And then he says, oh, he sounds like he's married. And of course, she falls for this. So she asks, whether or not he's married. And he's like, oh, well, this sounds like your friends are starting to question whether or not I'm married. And he doesn't actually answer it. And so they meet for lunch, and Joe says, oh, so he's avoiding the question. And he gives a bunch of other things that could be wrong with this guy. He's like, oh, what if he's fat? Oh, what if he has this wrong with him? Oh, what if he's got this wrong with him? They go off into like a farmer's market, and she says that she really only cares about the fact that she could never really be with somebody who owned a boat. And he responds with that he could never be with somebody who liked Joni Mitchell. So here's one of those things where they're jabbing each other once again. And so they sit on a bench, and he asks her about a book that she's starting to write too. So they're slowly becoming more and more friendly over the weeks. And then she starts to notice that they keep bumping into each other. And he suggests, how about we bump into each other intentionally, say Saturday around lunchtime? And she says, sure, let's do it. Then NY 152 suggests that they meet on Saturday at 4. So at lunchtime, they're discussing this upcoming meeting at 4. And he says that, NY 152's just been waiting until she's primed when she can't love another man. Later, as he's walking her back home, he tells her, sometimes I wonder, what if it hadn't been him? What if she hadn't owned her store? Maybe they could have been together. If only. What if we could have been in love with one another? And the only thing that we ever argued about was what movie to watch. And she's like, why would we fight about that?
I wish that was the only arguments that occurred during a relationship. Like, have these people never been in relationships before?
Right? Oh my gosh. So then she gets all teary-eyed, and he asks, how can you forgive him for standing you up, but not me for this thing? And she says that she really has to go. And meanwhile, he's just been scheming this whole time.
Oh, yeah.
So she then comes out in this gray dress, and she walks and then slows herself down, but then continues to like power walk to the park/garden where she's supposed to meet NY 152. And she's very anxious. You can see it all over her face. And she's looking around the corner. She sees people coming through the gardens, through the park. And every time she sees somebody walking past, her attention is going straight there. And then all of a sudden she hears Joe call out, Brinkley! And then there's a dog barking. She sees Joe across the way, and she smiles, but she also looks really confused and a little upset. And by the time he gets to her, she's pretty upset. And he says, don't cry, shop girl. She says, I wanted it to be you. And then they share a very hesitant, awkward kiss. They get better at it. And then Brinkley finds them, and he starts pulling at Joe's jacket, but Joe kind of pats him away. And as they continue to make out in front of this garden, we pan up to the sky, and the end is typed out on the screen. The end.
I wondered if they put dog treats in his pocket to get him like closer. Also, I noticed that he was like biting at his pocket.
Makes sense.
It would. I think Brinkley for sure was the star of this movie.
Yes. So this film does pass the Bechdel test. One of my favorite lines that passes is, I believe Christina asks Birdie if she's ever had online sex before, and she says yes, but then like the internet was too slow or something like that.
Oh, yeah. She's funny.
But yeah, so there were a couple of times where it passed, so that was good, especially since there were quite a few female characters.
Thank goodness. It wasn't a whole lot, though.
I mean, it was a lot about Joe, a lot about Frank. So there's some here and there. This is one of those things where I told you, like, not all romantic comedies pass the Bechdel test because of this.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
So, as for some fun trivia regarding You've Got Mail, so lots of references to Pride and Prejudice. A lot of this has to do with they consider Joe to sometimes be referred to as proud and Kathleen to be referred to as prejudiced, and vice versa throughout the movie itself. One of the times that they go to Starbucks, I believe it's one of the first times that they go to Starbucks, Kathleen orders a tall caramel macchiato and an employee actually gives her a grande cup.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised, like, oh, someone probably just didn't catch it. I'm like, why wouldn't they just re-record that?
Well, and then one of the things that I always notice whenever I'm watching TV and stuff like that is like, there's clearly nothing in those cups. Oh, because the way that people carry them or the way that they pick them up, you would never carry hot coffee like that.
Yes, someone was just like, I saw someone like having a rant on that. And they're like, we know nothing's in that cup. Like, just carry it the way that it's supposed to be carried. Or put like water in it or something. It's so funny. Yeah. Because then, like, when you watch, like, people are like waving it around like nothing.
Right.
And it's like, oh my God. It's kind of like how people don't eat in movies.
Yeah.
Or shows. Like, you watch them and like they'll pick at it and you're like, just eat already.
One of my biggest like pet peeves when I'm watching movie and TV is like when people enter any room, they always leave the door open.
Now I'm thinking, I'm like, I think I leave doors open. Do you close doors behind you in your own home?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Only for bed?
Yes. Like front doors every time.
Oh, front doors. Well, front doors, yeah. You can't let the AC out.
Like, but in TV shows and in movies, they always leave the front doors open.
Oh, I haven't noticed that. I'm going to have to look now.
Take a gander. Yep. So the filming locations for this, it was all Upper West Side of Manhattan in New York. And then some fun fact about Meg Ryan, she was prom queen at the high school that she graduated from, which is Bethel High School.
Okay.
The movie's opening and ending titles make use of commonly seen computer images of the time, specifically Windows 95 and 98, and the ending title song, which begins just after the words "the end" appear on the screen, start with an adaptation of the startup sound from Windows 95.
Oh.
So very focused on the idea of the internet. Joe Fox is obsessed with The Godfather, as we've discussed, and frequently uses dialogue from it to shape his philosophy on life. In the Coppola Restoration Godfather DVDs, Alec Baldwin claims that Tom Hanks and Rob Reiner are both Godfather aficionados and have hosted viewing parties where the attendees both play drinking games and quote famous lines while watching the films. The quotes are often used as funny pseudo-wisdom responses to various oddball questions in an informal game that is sometimes referred to as the Tao of the Godfather.
Interesting. Have you ever played a drinking game during a movie or a show? I've always wanted to. Like, every time someone says something or does something, you take a drink.
I've had the intention to and never actually stuck with it.
I don't know if I can handle drinking that much, though, anymore.
I think I can. I just always forget. And like, I never really watch anything with people is the thing.
Oh, yeah. Same. I don't think I do either. Even Billy and I hardly watch anything together. Like, we have to plan.
Right? Yep. We almost never watch movies together. So. Yeah. But yeah, so that is You've Got Mail. What are your thoughts?
Oh, man.
Ponderings.
Okay. I know this is a classic film and everybody loves Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. Oh, thank goodness. Okay, so I don't know if I want to give it a rating. So essentially, the movie starts off with an emotional love affair and romanticizes it. Like, these people are in full committed relationships, and we're starting their love story off basically with an emotional affair. And they basically state, like, oh, well, you haven't had sex with them, so it's technically not cheating.
I don't think that they knew what an emotional love affair was.
Maybe. Yeah. But it is what it is.
Right. Yeah, I will say, like, personally, this is not one of my most favorite movies. I actually do agree a lot more with the 1 out of 10. Like, I do think that Joe Fox's character is garbage.
Couldn't sense like the chemistry that they were like. I've never seen Casablanca before. Again, another one on my list, but I'm already gonna tell you right now, I don't think the two compare. Even not having seen it.
To be fair, from what I understand, at the end of Casablanca, they do not stay together. He sends her away and says, frankly, dear, I don't give a damn, because she's hurt him, and sends her off.
I've never seen it, but
I haven't either. But that's my understanding of it. But yeah, no, I don't like the fact that basically he's lying to her the entire movie. Like, he knows that she's shop girl and he's manipulating her throughout the entire thing and using like the inside knowledge of the fact that she is shop girl and the conversations that they've had to play her, you know? And so I really don't like that part. And I know that this is 98. And so it's almost 30 years old. But still. Yeah. It's not my favorite of that kind of genre.
He's being manipulative. He's scheming for his own personal benefit.
Right.
Because he doesn't want to just be honest and upfront.
Okay.
And when she says that, oh, you lied to me about who you were, he's like, no, I didn't. Not revealing information is lying. Okay. Let's just get that straight.
I am curious. So I was thinking about this the whole time. Like, we get some idea on what his family dynamic is, right? She's got almost no family dynamic whatsoever. It's basically Birdie and Christina.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, that's actually no blood family relation. It's friendship and maid family, chosen family. But his blood family relation is a mess, to put it lightly.
Yeah.
When you get involved with somebody, you get involved with their family also. And especially since his grandpa had a thing for her mom, like, how awkward must that be for her?
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that part. What is that going to be like for her? Awful.
I don't know.
No. Yeah, it's not my favorite of, the 90s rom-coms. For sure. Unfortunately, not for me.
I think it's fun to watch, but knowing that I have to put blinders on.
It's entertaining, and then you just have to remember this is in the 90s. This was a very different time as to what was acceptable.
That's basically all I can say.
Yeah,
like,
that's really all I have too.
I would mostly just give this like a 3.
Yeah, again, I'm going to agree with you. A 3.
Yeah. I think I gave The Happening a 3. And so I think this is the same.
Oh my God. Not for me.
So that is You've Got Mail.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Caffeinated Flicks. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can follow us on Instagram at caffeinatedflickspod or email us at caffeinatedflicks@gmail.com.
And just like every other podcast, we would love it if you could follow us in your podcasting app and give us a rating or review. Your feedback helps us get better. And if you're enjoying us so far, please tell a friend.
We'll catch you on the flick side.